Snakeskin number 2, here we go. Hello and welcome back to Squdge Craft. I have another resin video for you because it's a Friday. Okay, so previously I created these pieces using some snakeskin. So I did the circular piece that had resin underneath but not on top. I had this piece that had the resin underneath and poured on top, which produced a lot of bubbles. And then I had these ones that were just freeform on my silicone mat that I've peeled off. Now I learnt quite a lot with that, and I've got quite a lot of positive comments and feedback, so we're going to have another go. And today we're going to try it with a slow curing resin. So what that means is it's a resin that will cure a lot slower. It takes 3 days to be dry enough to remove from a mould, for example. Otherwise I tend to leave it slightly longer because I worry, because it does take a long time to really cure and you want to give it that time. The reason I'm going to try a slow cure is it dries slower, it cures slower, so that the bubbles have time to dissipate. So much thinner resin, so it's not quite as syrupy, it's a lot more thin, it flows a lot easier. And I use it a lot when I'm using flowers or things like that because it allows any bubbles that are there to dissipate. So I'm going to have a go at doing something very similar to what I've just done. I'm not going to do these because the slow cure resin will just flow off of it because it is so thin. But I'm going to have another go at doing a similar thing to this again and use that slow cure resin and see how it turns out, if it's better, if it's not better. I had a lot of requests for this, so I thought let's get on and do it. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, so I've selected the piece of snakeskin that I'm going to use, and as before, I'm just spreading it out and I'm going to cut it down the middle. So we've got one part that has the long, thin scales that would usually be on the underside, on the belly, and then we've got the other side, which is the slightly more recognisable regular scales of snakeskin. So I was just checking they would fit in the moulds. This piece that is the regular snakeskin was slightly crumpled, so what I did was I flattened it and laid it underneath the mould while I was mixing up the resin, just to flatten it out slightly so it looks a bit better and it wouldn't sort of all curl up on itself when the resin goes in. So I've just laid that underneath the mould. It was a little bit fiddly. Lucky for you, this is sped up because it was being very fiddly, but I've just put the mould on top of it just to sort of secure it underneath. And then it's time to mix up the resin. So as I said, I'm using a slow cure resin by Resin 8. I love this resin. It is like water. It's perfectly clear. It's beautiful to use. So I'm just going to, I apologise for my head getting in the way. I'm just going to pour a little bit into each mould. I do apologise for my head. As you can see, I'm wearing my respirator and my gloves. Please, please, please wear full PPE when using resin. So I've just ensured that there is resin all over the base, and then I tried to remove my piece of snakeskin, but there was a little bit of static and it was stuck to it. So I got some tweezers. It was a faff to make it flat, and now it's a faff to get it off. But there we go. I got it out, and I've just laid that in the centre. And as before, we're just going to lay this one on top. So I've just gently pushed it in to try and get any bubbles out. And then for this longer piece, we're going to lay it in and we're going to slightly push it down so it is covered by the resin. And I do apologise for my head getting in the way. I did realise and move, you see. I do love you guys. I do think of you. Sometimes I just get a little bit too interested in what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm just slowly laying that down so there are no bubbles underneath it. And then I'm just pushing it down so that there is a layer of resin over the top. So the round one, there is only resin underneath. You can still feel the snakeskin on top. The longer one, there is resin underneath and over the top of the snakeskin. Exactly the same as we did in part 1. The only variable we are changing is the type of resin, and we're using a slow cure resin. So yeah, let's see the results. Okay guys, it's that time. We are back to demould our snakeskin. So this was done in the slower curing resin. This does take approximately 3 days really before you even want to consider taking it out of the mould, and 21 days before it's completely cured. I did this because the first lot of snakeskin that we did had a lot of bubbles. So these are the first ones, and what we had in the round one with the smaller scales, it wasn't really as noticeable because the bubbles were inside the scales, and so it kind of disguised it, which was fine. But on this one, with the wider, I will add some pictures to make it a little bit easier for you. We had the wider scales that usually are around the underside, the belly. There are a lot of bubbles in this. So I thought it would be good to try this out with some slow cure resin. So I'm going to leave those here, and then we're going to do a bit of a comparison. So I'm going to start with the round one because that was the one that looked good in the regular resin anyway. So we'll pop this out, and yeah, I'd say it's a very, very similar result. I'll add pictures for you. I would say, I think, just holding it up, I would say it's a very, very similar result. There is not an awful lot of difference. Yeah, I would say they've performed pretty evenly in terms of the regular resin and the slower curing resin. But this is the one that's really interesting, and this is what's going to make the difference and help me plan the photo frame and the other bits and pieces that I want to do with snakeskin, and we want to try adding colour. So there will be at least a part 3, if not a part 4 as well. I'm having so much fun with this snakeskin experimentation. Okay, so if we take this out, that is a marked improvement. Wow. Okay, so again, I'll pop pictures up either side for you, but that is a very different look. I mean, we've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bubbles, whereas on this one we've got, I mean, many, many more. Yeah, I mean, this one's got over 20 and this one's really only got 5. We've got still some micro bubbles, but we had micro bubbles in both, and I think micro bubbles are going to be something that's going to appear there anyway, because in the slow cure resin, obviously it cures slower, so the skin does have the capacity to move if, say, the table is jogged, or if there's some wind, or if as we had over May half term, it gets very hot and then get very cold again, like when it's raining now. May half term? I meant May bank holiday. I'm not used to a bank holiday in the UK being hot, that's my problem. So yeah, I think the micro bubbles were more of an issue just because of the heat, temperatures and things like that, that may well have affected it even past those 3 days. But I do think the wider scales are a lot more successful in the slow cure resin, which was kind of what I expected. So I think the next plan, so part 3 of this video, will be to add the snakeskin in with some colour and see how colour plays with the scales, because I think it will look really cute and you may get a bit of a clearer look at the actual scales themselves. And yes, I'm intrigued to see how this works. So yeah, set 1 worked well with the regular resin. The smaller scales a lot more successful than the larger scales. With slow cure resin, the small scales again were brilliant and the larger scales were more successful. So next stop is to look, I think we're going to do the smaller scales. I just think they are more recognisably snake as well. If you know snakes, you can look at this and say, yes, that's snakeskin. But I think for the average person who either doesn't like snakes, doesn't know snakes, hasn't been around snakes, may not identify this as easily, whereas these scales are obviously, very obviously, identifiably as snake. So I'm going to work on these. They are also slightly easier to work with, so I think for the experiments I can use the regular resin, which will dry quicker, which means I can try more things out. I'm going to try adding some colour. I'm going to try doing colour on top and try doing colour underneath, so I'm going to try 2 different techniques, and we'll see how it looks. And I'm quite excited to see what comes out of it. If you would like me to do something specific with snakeskin in these experiments, let me know. I'm really enjoying experimenting and just trying out different things. So yeah, if there's something you would be interested in seeing with the snakeskin, please let me know down in the comments. If you've liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up and consider subscribing. I am doing this sort of snakeskin experimentation videos. I've also been experimenting putting things like sugar, salt, spices into resin, and intermingling that with just pouring some really beautiful moulds and trying out different techniques. I also do paper crafting, So on a Tuesday, you will see more mixed media, paper crafty, album walkthroughs, things like that. And if you're ever interested in the paper crafting a bit more, I do have my Twitch link in the description where you can come over and watch it live. So yeah, thank you very much for spending time with me today, guys. Keep crafting, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!